that the Keynesian model would be...
The idea of purchasing and buying and GDP
Yeah.
is a reflection more of a cultural push through marketing than through actually stating the economy.
I think they're kind of interrelated. So the question was, if I tell me if I'm rephrasing this right, the push towards focus on consumption, is that more of a marketing phenomenon from our culture,
Right.
more so than just driven by something that Keynes came up, or economic models? Is that kind of what you're getting at? And I think the two probably go hand in hand. So when Keynes in 1936 came up with this theory, and then we had the World War II pulled us out, was one of the contributing factors that helped pull us out of the Great Depression. People started to say, "Oh, we can spend. This works. This Keynes guy's got something figured out. We can start to do that." And so I think the focus then started to be on spending, when really the Great Depression turned a lot of people into big savers. They all of a sudden had the notion, kind of what's going on today too, that I think saving is more on the minds of people than it was in the past. And so the pendulum, I think, has swung back now to the saving. And so what will happen with our culture if we start to move that direction? I think they kind of played hand in hand, in that the government spending's good, we need to spend more money. People might implicitly, if not rationally, kind of think, oh, well, it's okay to spend money, and you know what I mean?
The emergence of mass marketing and propaganda during that time frame too. So I just wondered what influence you thought that had on culture and then thereby.
Yeah, I think it certainly would have had a big influence with the television, right? Bringing, as far as part of marketing.
Print, it started out in print.
Yeah.
Right prior to World War II.
Yeah, I think I'm leaning towards that being more of the culture of consumerism being a part of it, and not being refuted by economists that are following the Keynesian thoughts. Had economists come out and said, they were more on the high, you guys are being stupid, you gotta not spend your money, you know what I mean? If the theory would have supported, that's what I mean, they kind of supported each other, I think. Okay, good. Anything else? All right, let me get this out of the way here. All right, so we're going to look a little closer at the Keynesian model that and kind of start to see maybe why people thought it made some sense, and maybe frankly it made some sense at different points in history. Sometimes it works, and there might be short-term effects that don't persist long-term. So in chapter 11 we look at a different model that shows, kind of starts off with consumption being the primary factor. So chapter 11. This is the aggregate expenditure. Aggregate expenditure model. So expenditure kind of highlights right off the bat spending, right? The focus being on spending. And so this is a Keynes-driven model. So sometimes it's referred to as the Keynesian cross. All right, so let's see. Let's start off with a consumption function. Consumption function. So imagine we've got our consumption from our cigarettes being the 70% here of GDP. Where does that come from? Well, there's two parts. the primary part we've talked about, it comes from our income, right? We make some money and we spend part of that. We might save part of that. And then we might also be able to consume from non-income sources. So previous savings might be a possibility if we think at a personal level. If somebody gives us some money, some gifts of some sort. And so we're going to lump that all into this little parameter A and call it autonomous consumption. Autonomous consumption is independent of income. So our income, we're going to spend a fraction of that from our marginal propensity to consume of our income. So this little chunk here says I'm going to spend 90% of my income on consumption. So the MPC is the marginal propensity to consume. The marginal propensity to consume. And I'll just put a little note here. Marginal propensity to consume is the fraction of income used for consumption. And then here we've got our income, which is also our GDP. Thinking about the expenditure approach, what we earn. And for now, let's just say there's no taxes, just to keep things simple. No tax yet. So let's just say that there's no income tax to worry about. We'll clutter this thing up later with that. So here's our basic consumption function. And if I was to graph consumption on the vertical axis and income on the horizontal, what would it look like? Here's your formula. Basically want to graph this out. Yep, question?
Yeah, would it be A plus, would you put a parenthesis with NPC times Y?
Yeah, you can.
Okay.
Yep. It's not really needed, but that's okay from as far as stating the equation. Those two, that's one chunk of it, and this is another chunk. Okay, so what does this function look like in our two-dimensional space? Sawyer? Upward sloping, good. So if this is, like we said, 0.9, if you tend to consume 90% of your income, if that's 0.9, then that's a positive number, that it's upward sloping. So this is the slope of the curve. It's literally a y equals mx plus b. So you're starting to see it, right? So we got y for those slope-intercept form people. Remember your textbook, if you ever want to review some of that, chapter 1 appendix has all this stuff in there. Y equals mx plus b. Oh, I'll write it the way you did, where the b is the intercept, the m is the slope, and the x, of course, is the y, right? Slope-intercept form of a line. So our intercept here is little a, the autonomous part of consumption. If grandma gave me $100 and I don't have a job, then I can consume $100 if I want. I can consume all of it. If grandma gave me $100 and I have a job making $1,000 and I consume 90% of that, we can now map out that with $1,000 worth of income, I could be or will be doing this amount of consumption, where I've got the grandma income plus the amount that I want to do on my own. And this gives us our consumption function, the C function. And the slope of this thing, the slope equals the marginal propensity to consume, since we've got it in slope-intercept form. Okay, questions on that? Let me tell you where we're going with this right at this point. We're going to try to measure the aggregate expenditure for the whole economy. So what we're going to add on to this is the rest of these letters, I plus G plus X. And that's going to then create the total expenditures based on our income. That's kind of where we're headed. Before we do that, though, I want to talk about the marginal propensity to save. So let's put one other note here. So note, if we have our income and we put it into two categories here, consumption and savings, we can think of the fraction that we're going to consume with each. So our marginal propensity to consume tells us the amount we'll put towards consumption. If that's 90%, how much are we putting towards savings? 10, right? So the two have to add up. So maybe instead of putting this here, note the marginal propensity to consume plus the marginal propensity to save equals 1. Or 100% if we shift the decimal places over. So if you want to put a little thing just to kind of motivate this, if it's 90% or 0.9 plus whatever's left over has to equal up to 1, so we can think of it being 10% for the marginal propensity to save or 0.1. This might come in handy on a homework problem or a test question. If you're given the marginal propensity to save, you can calculate the marginal propensity to consume. So if we do a little multiplication, let's note that 1 minus the marginal propensity to save equals the marginal propensity to consume. 1 minus 0.9 or 1 minus 0.1 equals 0.9. That's just something to think about, that we can think about it as one or the other and go back and forth. Okay, so now let's add on investment. Okay, so let's ask the question. If we add investment to spending, and it is autonomous. What happens to the spending curve, to the spending line? So if we add investment and it's autonomous, so for example, let's say investments equal to $50 million, some number. what happens to our spending function?
Autonomous, it would move our A, right?
It'll move the A. So now we're just A plus 50. That's all we're doing is we're adding another autonomous part now to the spending line. And so the new line with I in there would be jumping up to A plus 50. And it would still be parallel. There's nothing changing with the marginal propensity to consume. And now we have C plus I. So let's call that a number 1. If government is equal to, oh, I don't know, just to keep something different here, 30, what happens? So if it's a fixed sum, drops kind of out of the sky, we don't have it dependent upon income, then this line moves up to A plus 50 plus 30. And I'm not really drawing it to scale here, but A plus 50 plus 30. And now we've got a C plus I plus G line. Okay, I'm going to leave off net exports for now, and we'll just consider what we call a closed economy. So kind of back to international trade. Suppose we don't trade with anybody, right? We don't sell anything to the rest of the world. We don't buy anything. We have a closed economy. We've got C plus I plus G looks as the spending function. All right, so next step. Our next step is to think about the plans of people versus the actual production. So at the heart of this model is learning about inventories, which also motivates the topic of timing. Okay, so let's think about inventory of goods in the economy. And the difference between production and spending. Okay, first of all, what do you think I'm getting at here? The inventory of goods. What is inventory? Supply. Okay, so it's a kind of a form of supply, right? So we haven't purchased it yet, but it's been made and it's ready to be purchased. And Keynes kind of started thinking about that aspect of the economy. And it is actually part of business investment is the inventories that they're holding. And so it kind of helps motivate us thinking about the difference between spending and inventories. So let's redraw measuring real GDP on the horizontal axis, or income. It's going to be helpful to think about it being both here. I'll get to that in a second. And then over here, let's look at planned spending, which is our aggregate expenditures, AE, which you might, I don't know if I put AE on that when we started this off with your notes, the aggregate planned expenditure or aggregate expenditure. That's kind of what we're measuring here. We've got a aggregate expenditure line, that looks like what we just derived here. We've broadened it from consumption now. In fact, I don't know if it's helpful, you might start to think of this being AE. Just kind of put an X through your C, that we kind of built it up just to motivate how this thing looks. And then in equilibrium, the amount of stuff that's made is the amount of stuff that gets purchased, right? And so spending equals production in equilibrium. These two things are equal to each other. And so we can show that by drawing a 45-degree line in this space. So just split the difference with equal parts with a 45-degree reference line. So the 45-degree line shows all equilibrium points where aggregate spending equals production. Production is now the Y. And it seems like all the action happens in economics where the two lines cross. So this point A, at this level of output of production, has this level of aggregate expenditures. And so this would be kind of an equilibrium type point. All right, why is it equilibrium? Well, if the economy is out here, or if the economy is back here, let's call these Y2 and Y3. At Y2, the amount of production in the economy is greater than what people are spending. So what's happening to the shelves of Walmart? Is inventory growing or shrinking? If the amount of production from the plant is greater than what's being spent, it's growing, right? So inventories are growing. At a point like Y2, there is excess inventory. What does Walmart do with their distributors when there's excess inventory? Do they order more? No, they say, hey, we're good this week. I know we ordered 1,000 last week, but let's order 500. And so we tend to move this direction through inventory growth. So over here, anywhere in this little region, we have inventory growth, which signals to producers to reduce production. Over here, spending on goods and services is exceeding production. How is that possible? Through inventories. We have built up enough goods so that we don't have to exactly produce the amounts that are there. Once the shelves start to fall, so inventory is falling now, Walmart calls up its producers and says, hey, we need more, we need more. Our shelves are running bare, go, 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 go. And so then production increases. So that's kind of the story of how inventories play a role in the economy to get us back to this point. All right, that's good enough for today. We'll pick up there on Monday. Have a good weekend.